I'd like to do a short, brief take on nationalism because it lies at the heart of our modern international system. The nation state is the building block of the modern international system. Today, there are 193 nation states in the world. And if you're lucky, you belong to one of them, and you have a government and an army that protects you. If you do not belong to a nation state, you really have no rights. Think of refugees. But nations are a modern element in the national system. There were no nation states a little over 200 years ago. They begin with the twin revolutions of the French Revolution in the end of the 1700s and the American Revolution that happened at the same time. These two revolutions, the American and French, really began a whole new framework for international order. Over 200 years ago, there were no nation states. Think empires, kingdoms, bishoprics, free cities, tribal concatenation, caliphates, all kinds of political institutions and states, but no nation states. In just 200 years, the entire map of the globe has been resorted out along national lines. Now, a lot of people like to say the nation state, we're in a post-national era today. But that really is, I think, misguided. Over 100 nation states gained independence from the World War II, 1945, to 1970. That's more than half the nation states. They are trying to sort out their borders, figure out who's in and who's out, who belongs to the nation and who is a fifth column. And many of the wars in the world are really defined by that attempt to build nation states. I would argue that certainly in international relations, the single most important defining factor for modernity is the rise of the nation state. It's changed how we identify ourselves and how we identify with authority. At the heart of this political revolution is a revolution of identity. People identify with others from their nation. And sovereignty, political power, is invested in the people, not in the rulers. In the Middle Ages, it was common for people to believe in what was called the chain of being, what Shakespeare called the chain of being. That's a long, in a sense, chain of authority that starts with God, works its way down through angels, the seven spheres of heaven, to kings, the aristocrats, bourgeoisie, commoners. Then, of course, there's various kinds of indentured servants and serfs, slaves, animals, various demons, all the way down to the devil. And of course, you know, in some medieval scripts, there's supposed to be 9 spheres. Dante had 9 spheres of hell. So this long chain of being gets completely destroyed and rethought. The world, in a sense, is leveled. Today, in the American Constitution, it says all people are created equal. There is no chain of being. That national identity, where all people are supposed to be equal, and in fact, authority is no longer invested in the king, but in the subjects. If you think about our political discourse, the rulers, our rulers today are our servants. All political, in a sense, candidates talk about themselves as servants, public servants. And power is invested in the people who are sovereign. The nation state, it's the nation, the people who are sovereign, and the rulers are the servants. This turns authority on its head 180 degrees from the time of kings before the French Revolution and the American Revolution to today. There are still many kings and sovereigns who are authoritarian in the world. Perhaps half the globe is still ruled in the old way. But every year we're seeing kingdoms fall and more sovereign nations where people actually have a degree of say over their own authority. One can liken this revolution in the realm of international relations to a giant earthquake in which the aftershocks continue to ripple across the globe. And in the Middle East, we're still seeing those aftershocks. We're seeing, for example, a Kurdistan ripping itself out of Iraq, Syria, perhaps Turkey even. We're seeing Palestinians making a drive for a state. Southern Sudan just a few years ago hived off and was recognized as a separate state from Northern Sudan. So the national borders that are created in the First World War are not always permanent. They're being contested. The Islamic State, which has been so much in the news recently, destroyed the border between Iraq and Syria only a few years ago. It erased it. It raised its flag and said, we have destroyed nation states. We're going to rebuild an Islamic caliphate. In a sense, challenging this development of the nation state in the Middle East. Now, of course, America is destroying, is bent, hell-bent, and much of the West is, in a coalition to destroy that Islamic state. And in a sense, to bring back the borders that were hammered out in World War I. But the power of national identity has been extraordinary. It has swept everything before it. Empires, as in the First World War, the four that we talked about and that were destroyed in the First World War, could not compete with nation states, where people are willing to sacrifice themselves in millions in modern wars in allegiance to that nation. And they have overwhelmed in their capacity to put forward armies, in their administrative know-how, the individual being the heart of this new political structure has unleashed tremendous creativity. So constitutionalism and nation states have been an extremely dynamic force that in a Darwinian sense have just swept all the other political concatenations into the dustbin of history. And that is largely the story, our story, of the creation of the modern Middle East and the modern Middle Eastern state system is the rise of nation states.